Hello, and welcome to today's webcast, Security at the Speed of Business, brought to you by Sanity Solutions. Before we get started, there are a couple of housekeeping items that I would like to go over. First, we want to make this session as interactive as possible and encourage to ask questions at any time using the question and answer box located below the slides window. You can also use the question and answer box to get technical assistance if you should need it. Today's presentation is being presented via streaming audio only, so there is no need to dial into a teleconference. You'll need to make sure that your computer speakers are turned up in order to hear the presenter. You can also fine-tune the audio by using the volume controls inside the media window. The presentation console allows you to interact and customize the layout to fit your viewing experience. You can collapse and expand any window on the console just like you would on your desktop by dragging the corners in or out. In addition, you can also maximize or close any of the windows on your screen by clicking the corresponding icon in the upper right-hand corner on each of the windows. At any time, you can reset the console to the default layout and access additional presentation functionality using the widgets at the bottom of the presentation console. Now, I would like to turn things over to today's presenters, Mike Gluck and Chris Larkins, to get things started.
Hi, my name is Mike Gluck. I'm Vice President and CTO for Sanity Solutions. I've been with Sanity Solutions for 7 years. We're headquartered in Denver, and we're an IT solution provider. And we partner with 27 different vendors, all focused on enterprise infrastructure and data management, including servers, storage, networking, virtualization, data protection, cloud, and security. We've been recognized by Computer Reseller News for the last 4 years as a Tech Elite 250, which means that we're one of the top 250 technical VARs in the U.S. We're an enterprise VMware VAR as well as a Dell EMC Titanium VAR. So today we're going to talk about how VMware can help your organization secure its application infrastructure, and that is the servers and other physical and virtual infrastructure that the applications run on to drive your business. So let's get started. The agenda for today is to talk about how digital transformation is putting pressure on IT and why the solution is abstraction and how abstraction delivers many benefits. And to set the stage, I want to talk about the overall security information spending. This was a study by Gartner Group for 2016, and they published a matrix of security spending. And this is an eye chart, but the important point is that there's 15 different security segments identified here that run the gamut of infrastructure, endpoint, applications, web, mobile, and data security. And all these vendors are competing for a piece of the company's IT budget. And if we look at the results of how that spending is translated, unfortunately, it's not keeping up with the bad guys. This is a chart here that was done by the Center for Strategic and International Studies for the same year, 2016, and the annual cost of security breaches was $445 billion. That's more than 5 times what the entire industry spent to prevent these breaches. And if we look on the far right, we can see that security spending as a percent of the IT budget is actually more than doubled from 11% in 2012 to 21% of the security of the IT budget in 2015. And this is all while IT spend is roughly flat. So clearly, this is not a situation that we're underfunding security. Really, the situation is that the problem is complex. And it's complex because digital transformation is forcing a lot of changes on security professionals. The business is demanding faster application delivery, reduction in risk, and reduction in cost and complexity. But this is challenging demands for IT in a rapidly and continuously changing environment. And digital transformation is inevitably reshaping IT in businesses that can be disrupted. Just take, for example, Amazon's incursion into the retail space and the recent acquisition of Whole Foods. Companies have to change and adapt or face the inevitable decline into obsolescence. And we're seeing an explosion in the number of users accessing countless applications that are more distributed than ever from a wide range of endpoints. And these applications are no longer just monolithic stacks sitting in a physical data center somewhere, but rather they're distributed across clouds and across geographical boundaries. And they're built and run in a much more dynamic fashion than ever before in virtual machines and containers and leveraging microservices. So this is creating new challenges when it comes to securing application infrastructure, and securing the old way of doing things isn't enough. At Sanity Solutions, we like to say that Einstein's definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So let's further explore what some of the deficiencies in the current approaches to security. And the reality is that we face is that the perimeter-centric network security model of the past is no longer good enough, and it's broken in the new security environment that we're seeing, where all of the breaches over the past few years have shown time and time and again that attackers are going to figure out how to get through or around our perimeter defenses. They'll usually target weak, low-priority systems first, and once they're in, they're able to move laterally throughout the data center until they find what they're looking for. So it's simply a matter of then exfiltrating the data out of the organization, at which point it's too late, you've already been compromised. And I would even argue that the whole idea of data center perimeter no longer exists as threats because they're able to exploit such a large attack surface. And when you have an application infrastructure across multiple clouds, public and private, across multiple data centers, leveraging VMs and containers, then you have to ask yourself, where exactly is the data center perimeter? So if we look at the real problems here of the existing security strategies, the legacy approach has been to protect applications by monitoring the perimeter for known threat signatures. But the problem of this signature-based approach is best exemplified by today's antivirus software. And antivirus software has a massive database of known malware signatures that it uses to identify threats on an endpoint, but there's a few problems with this approach. The main one is that it's signature-based, and signature-based solutions miss threats that are unknown to them. You've probably heard about zero-day attacks. So if the solution hasn't seen the threat before, there's really no signature to match, and the threat will be missed. There have been attempts to address this problem, and it's really been associated with behavioral analytics and machine learning. And the idea here is to aggregate the data from as many parts of the environment as possible, generally by tapping into a security information and event monitoring system, or SIEM, solution that uses a combination of machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms to sort out normal behavior from threats. But the problem with this approach is the noise. These solutions take in so much data from so many different corners of the environment that it's increasingly difficult for them to accurately detect the threats. And as a result, they tend to produce a high number of false positives. So now I'd like to hand off the microphone to my colleague Chris Larkins from VMware, and he's going to tell you about a new paradigm that VMware is pioneering and based on where VMware sits in the environment. And I'll give you a hint. The project code name was Goldilocks. So Chris?
Thanks, Mike. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Larkins. I'm a networking and security specialist with VMware, and it's a pleasure to join you all and Mike here today. I appreciate the time. Mike did a great job of framing up some of the challenges we're seeing with IT security infrastructure today. And I'm going to take you through a few slides and a few different solutions that we're seeing, both between Sanity Solutions and VMware. And the interesting piece as we move through these various solutions and products and options to fix the issues we're seeing in the market is that they all start with what we call abstraction. And the basic idea here is that we extract the intelligence from what has traditionally lived in a hardware-based model and put that into a software layer so that it's more flexible, easier to secure, and more nimble throughout the environment. We do this throughout the data center, whether it's compute with vSphere, storage with vSAN, or networking with NSX. the entire idea is to move things more into a software-based approach so that we can take the operational model of a virtual machine and extend that throughout the data center. And one of the big benefits of that is enabling automation throughout the data center, whether we're talking about security, whether we're talking about networking, storage, compute, etc. Automation has a number of different benefits. So when we take a look at leveraging automation throughout the data center, it brings us a whole host of capabilities when we start to look at the life cycle of applications and how we secure those applications. So it's critical when we start looking at security of applications that we get a picture of how each endpoint and each application is supposed to look and supposed to operate. So we have a new solution at VMware called App Defense, which takes a look at the actual processes and services that should be running on the OS and in the application, which ports they should be communicating on, etc. And the automated collection of the intended state of this application is key to what we're trying to accomplish from a security standpoint. So if you take a look at the life cycle of an application today, when IT provisions a new app, App Defense has the ability to collect the intended state of that application. And then as that application changes and moves through its life cycle, we have the ability to understand those changes and automate and adjust as those changes happen within your environment. It's essentially inserting security into the DevOps process, which really changes the way that we can operationalize the entire security profile of our data center. Now, the other place that automation is very important is in detection and response. So when an unauthorized change is made to an application, App Defense is immediately able to detect the runtime state of that application against its intended state. So since we know what an application is supposed to be doing and the processes that it's supposed to be executing on a given day, we can understand when it's doing something that it's not supposed to do. And the automation comes in when we pair with solutions like vSphere and NSX on the networking side, so that we have the ability to not only raise an alert when an application goes outside of its boundaries, but we can actually quarantine an application. We can block it from executing a process. We can increase the logging against a specific endpoint. We can suspend or shut down or snapshot a VM. It gives us a whole host of automated responses that we can use to any type of threats that show up against the applications in our data center. Now, once we've taken a look at application security and made sure that we've locked down the applications that we're using on a daily basis, then we can look at solutions to increase visibility and context. So Mike mentioned the term Goldilocks. We believe that the hypervisor is at a unique place between the infrastructure and the applications to provide both visibility and context that are important to a security infrastructure. So once you've secured those applications and you start looking into full visibility, we have something called vRealize Network Insight, which essentially looks at the data paths and provides a contextual understanding of interaction amongst users and applications and infrastructures. And the tool itself allows us to enable a managed security policy that we can then execute throughout the data center. We can install this in less than an hour, and it's something that will take a look at the flows in between your applications, your VLANs, your virtual machines today, and provide you back information that has the visibility and context to help you make intelligent decisions as you build out your data center infrastructure and how you secure that. So better security really at the heart of things depends on simplified policy. And once we have visibility and context and we understand the intended state of our applications, we have the ability to implement simpler security policy. Now, traditional security policy depended on things like IP addresses and ports. And those were a lot of the questions that got asked early on is what happens with IP addresses? How do we block traffic from an IP address to another IP address or VLAN to another VLAN? Once we start talking about moving these solutions into a software-based approach, we can change the attributes that we set our security policy on. So now we can identify security policies based on things like operating systems, machine names, application tiers, etc. And it allows us to kind of revolutionize the way that we look at security posture inside of data centers. And ultimately, what we're doing is aligning our policy to our applications. So no longer does security policy have to be tied to those IP addresses. We can actually align it to things like lines of business, like different application tiers, whether that be web, application, database. We can align security policies that live with a VM and with an application. And as new applications and new VMs are brought online that match the policies of existing ones, we can automate the process of deploying those security policies. And then just as importantly, as applications and VMs are decommissioned, those security policies will go away with them so that you don't have stale and open firewall rules, for an example, sitting within your environment. So defining the security policy, understanding the applications, increasing visibility, and having context, those are all important things. But one of the most important things that we talk about at VMware is once you've decided to design that policy in a new way, you want to be able to enforce it all the way down to the individual VNIC of every single workload inside your environment. And we call this micro-segmentation. Micro-segmentation has become a little bit of a buzzword, but at the end of the day, what we're talking about is the ability to take a virtualized firewall and install that into the kernel of the hypervisor of every single VM so that we can isolate the traffic from one VM to the next and one application to the next. So that the threat that Mike talked about earlier that might make it in past your perimeter defenses can't move laterally within your data center. And a whole host of the very public breaches that we've seen in the past year, 2, 3 years have been when bad guys came in and essentially compromised a low priority system and then moved east-west within the data center. So they got into a low priority system with low security controls, and then they were very it was very easy, for them to move from one VM or one application to the next to siphon off important data from those customers. Micro-segmentation provides isolation so that there's protections against that lateral movement within a data center. Now, this all comes back to a hypervisor-based approach. So Mike mentioned the term Goldilocks, and we've talked a lot about visibility and context. But it's very important that we look at the hypervisor as a basis for a lot of the security architectures that I've mentioned previously and solutions that I've mentioned previously. So you'll hear a lot from Sanity and VMware around updating to vSphere 6.5 as the latest and greatest hypervisor. And one of the big reasons for that is encryption. So encryption of both data at rest and data in flight, both of them are key. When we talk about encrypting data at rest at the workload level, the safety of an application infrastructure data is really ensured when it's not in active use. When we're talking about encrypting data in flight, switches and routers are protected from exposure by preventing attackers from being able to sniff traffic or spoof legitimate machines. And all of these key capabilities are native to the latest vSphere hypervisor. And we can start with that vSphere hypervisor and then extend into solutions like NSX for networking security and micro-segmentation, and into app defense for application security within your data center. So we've covered a lot in a very short period of time, and we appreciate the time and the attention you guys have given us here today. We talked from a solution standpoint about abstraction being the key to securing your applications and infrastructure. And the key reasons for that are increasing visibility and context, and then creating more effective policies within our data center for security. I talked a little bit about micro-segmentation and granular application aligned security policy, and that's really taking a look at how do we take that security policy that we implement down to the basic level of infrastructure and to our applications where it matters most. And then hypervisor-based infrastructure protection. So making sure that you're on vSphere 6.5, the latest VMware version, to take advantage of key security policies and key security features like encryption. So before we leave you, I wanted to mention one quick analogy to help drive some of this home. As we look at IT security as it lies in our data center today, we want to think about the difference between a traditional castle versus a hotel. So in a traditional castle, we have very, very strong perimeter controls, right? A very high wall like you can see in the picture, typically a moat. You know, there was cannons coming out from the walls to protect from anything getting inside of that castle. Now, the challenge we've seen throughout history, Trojan horse being kind of the epitome example, is that once someone breaks through those perimeter controls, they can take a castle very, very quickly because there's no interior defenses. So all the doors are typically opened and unlocked because they expect that nothing bad is going to get in. Now, unfortunately, that's just not the world we live in today. And so you can contrast that with the idea of a modern day hotel. Where in a modern day hotel, you may break down the front door and get into the hotel very, very easily. But in order to get to anything important, you have to get into each individual room. So you might go to the first floor and go to room 1A and break down that door, but you can only get to what's in that door. So if you need to get to information that's on the third floor, you're going to have to go break through another door. And what we've done and created with micro-segmentation is essentially that same idea within the enterprise data center. So even if a threat does get into your data center today, if you have a micro-segmented approach with security policies that are well thought out and well defined, then the attack surface will be very much limited compared to that traditional perimeter-only security approach. So we'll leave you with that as something to think about in the new way to approach security inside the data center. We'd encourage you to reach out to Sanity Solutions, either online, you can see the social ways to get a hold of them today, or please reach out to Mike or myself and we can get you in touch with the right people to have some deeper discussions around both the capabilities that Sanity Solutions can bring, as well as a lot of the security postures that we talked about today. So with that, we will take it to Q&A. Thank you for your time. All right, it looks like we've got a couple of questions coming in on the chat, Mike. So the first is, does NSX and App Defense together mean that we don't need perimeter firewalls or other forms of defenses anymore? That's a great question. So the answer is absolutely not. So one way to think about this is if you deploy an alarm system at home and implement motion detectors in your house, it doesn't mean that you're going to stop locking the front door, right? So we're not advocating for getting rid of your perimeter firewalls. Those still have their place in IT security and are still very important. We're just looking at new solutions like micro-segmentation and application security in the virtualized environment as additional levels of controls and protection. So thanks for the question. And second question, Mike, looks like would be towards you, and it is, how is App Defense priced, and what will it provide if I don't have NSX or VRNI today?
Okay, thanks, Chris. So the good news there is that App Defense is priced very affordably. It's $500 per socket, and it can operate in a standalone basis without anything else and provide you with the monitoring and the visibility into your critical applications that you are wanting to secure. Of course, it will work as well and better if you have either third-party programs or NSX and vRealize, because that way you can have programmatically set up actions to react quickly to any issue that occurs. But App Defense is, as I mentioned, very affordable and very economical.
Great. Mike, I don't see any other questions in the chat window today, so thank you all very much for your time and participation, and please reach out to Sanity if you've got additional questions. Thanks all.
Thank you.